Finally, there's the matter of the dialogue in this movie. There are so many comically stupid lines you'd think this was written by Reki Kawahara. I show off a lot of them in my reactionary portion of this review, so go there if you want to see them. Most noteworthy are Asuka and Mari, who rarely say anything that isn't completely retarded or just plain bullshit. One of my personal favorites was Mari pretending she knew the original Rei when she'd never met her. But one thing I failed to show there was Kaoru. Now, he only said a few lines in 2.0, but they were pretty interesting and thought-provoking. Like the part how he says, "This time, I will show you true happiness." There was a ton of speculation that could have been done with just that one line. But now, he says a bunch of lines that are just nonsense. None of these are thought-provoking like that one line was. There's so much nonsense in this movie you couldn't possibly hope to worry about what bullshit he might be spouting. Now I get to the matter of fan service. Now, there was of course some fan service in the previous installments, but fortunately, the majority of it was subtle, with only a couple of scenes being the exception. But Evangelion 3.0's fan service is all blatant and in your face. From blatant crotch shots and ass shots, to centering the frame on Mari's jiggling tits. Seriously, what the fuck's up with the jiggling tits? Don't these plug suits have any support? I guess not anymore, because then we couldn't keep the interest of horny teenage boys. And did Mari's tits get bigger? In this installment of the tetralogy, in a decision I can only ascribe to laziness and cheapness, Anno elected to abuse the hell out of CGI more than ever before. In several scenes, it's something truly horrific, completely lacking in detail or attention. Not only that, but all of these stupid enemies are composed of simple geometric shapes. In addition to this, many of the character designs just look off. I'm not talking about their outfits and shit, I'm talking about how their faces are drawn. Some are worse than others, like Misato, who doesn't even look like the same person anymore, unless you look at her from a very specific angle, and Rei, whose inconsistency I already showed in part 1, and Kaoru, who, well, just look at him. Other than those aspects though, the movie is pretty visually impressive. Naturally, when the movie isn't using CGI as a crutch, there are some pretty epic looking shots in there, but as a whole, after nearly 3.5 years with unexplained delays, the visuals aren't even on par with the previous installment. Even 1.0's CGI was better, but neither of the previous installments abused CGI to such an obscene degree. Along the same lines, the action scenes were actually really poorly choreographed and just generally unexciting. Due to the horrible writing, it didn't feel as though there was anything at stake in these action sequences. Contrast with the things like the final battles in 1.0 and 2.0. In 1.0, Ramiel's attack felt intense because we knew the high stakes, and the Angel felt extremely imposing, though not completely impossible to defeat. The same is the case for Zeruel in 2.0, as the thing fucking blasts straight down into the Geofront in no time and solos 2 Avas, well, I guess 1.5, and almost takes out one more. Both of these times, we're like, shit, if this thing reaches Lilith, it's over. We have more than sufficient context and build-up, and are aware of the stakes involved. That's not the case in 3.0. We have 2 unexplained, context-less battles back-to-back in the very beginning whose consequences are unknown, and so have no tension, and so nobody cares. The same applies to the finale, where we're treated to such incredible battle choreography as Asuka beating brainlessly against Unit 13's AT field. Again, and again, and again. But this brings me to the next thing. It seems that Shiro Sagisu, the music composer, is the only person on staff who brought his A-game to this thing. The music is fucking amazing, especially the driving action pieces, which I would actually argue are slightly better than the similarly toned tracks in 2.0. It's outright goosebump-inducing. All you people worshipping Yuki Kajiura for being the epic-est anime music composer, especially if you're delusional enough to think that Sword Art Online had an epic soundtrack, need to wake the fuck up and hear what this man can do when he has the talents of the London Studio Orchestra under his command. Just as the action tracks are a little better though, the more casual and slower pieces are kind of lackluster in comparison to ones prior, such as the Rei opuses. The ending theme of 3.0 is so devastatingly sad and beautiful that it almost makes you forget how horrible the movie it serves as a finale for was, at least for as long as I'm listening to it. If the emotion of the ending of the movie at all matched the song that came afterward, it would have been really powerful. Hell, it would have been great if it were possible to feel anything at all during this movie, except for uncontrolled rage. The voice acting was alright too. I absolutely love Megumi Hayashibara as Rei. Surprisingly enough though, it was Megumi Ogata as Shinji that put on the best performance, and put in the perfect amount of emotion in delivering each of her lines. Ritsuko's Seiyu sounded absolutely horrible though. The rest of the cast sounded pretty lackluster. Yes, that includes Mari and Asuka. All Mari did was sound conceited, and all Asuka did was sound pissed. The sound effects are excellent as always too, though there's not actually much new from the previous previous movies. But anyways, the music is far and away the best part of Evangelion 3.0. The music does a great job at distracting you and making scenes seem more powerful than they actually are. This movie suffers from more syndrome, more Evas, more weird shit, more angels, more impacts, more explosions, more awakened Evas, more weird shit. None of this actually lends any real quality to the film, but can definitely serve well to bludgeon the disillusioned masses into stupefaction. In reality, the blatant rape of these otherwise cool and significant things nullifies their impact. Now, are there any legitimate redeeming qualities in this movie? Actually, there are. Two, in fact. The first is Shinji's character. Shinji's character is consistent and sensible, mostly, though this is hindered by the plot-induced stupidity at the end and his instantaneous trust of Kaoru. The second is Rei's character. Yes, in spite of mutilating her, there's actually some very subtle characterization in there to try to make up for it, even though it should have never been necessary to begin with. Now, are these enough to save the character department? Of course not, but they're there, and I give credit where it's due, no matter how minuscule it is. But ultimately, all this does is boost the character department from an otherwise would have been 0 out of 10 to almost a 2 out of 10. If you turn off the subtitles, this movie is actually fucking awesome. If you don't pay any fucking attention to what's happening, it undoubtedly seems great, but it's not great. The film is a catastrophic clusterfuck. It's an unmitigated disaster. Not only does it immediately leave the viewer reeling with the huge discontinuity between it and the previous installment, and by not bridging the gap, waiting to answer the most basic of questions until over halfway through the movie, but it continues throwing sucker punches to ensure that there is no chance for the viewer to ever regain their footing and establish their bearings. Questions ceaselessly fracture into even more and more questions like a spider web, capping the viewer with no hope of escape. Previous character development is reset and characters bear little to no semblance of who they were before. So much is different, yet no explanations exist to explain those differences. It's like this movie isn't even related to the ones that came before. The gap in continuity is just that huge. The previous two movies made infinitely more sense than this one. This wasn't the movie we saw in the preview at the end of 2.0. It's not even fucking close. That movie was scrapped halfway through, and in exchange, we got this butt mess of a movie. And no, it's not the case that 3.0 didn't make sense because it's super deep or complex or leaving things open to interpretation or anything else fucking stupid like that. There's a difference between leaving things open to interpretation and making something that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It doesn't make sense because it was written by someone who probably forgets how to breathe at least once every 6 hours. Yes, I'm bashing Hideaki Anno. Get over it, fanboys. I don't know what the fuck happened to his brain between 2.0 and 3.0. Maybe all the radiation from the earthquakes got to him. Apparently, there were 3 other directors and 2 other screenplay writers working on this shit. How is it that none of these people raised their hands and were like, Anno? What the fuck is this garbage? In comparison, Evangelion 2.0 had 6 other people working on the storyboard, only one of which still did so for this movie. Maybe that was the crucial difference that made this movie's writing and script so fucking stupid. I hope Evangelion 4.0 is the most magnificent 100 minutes of expert storytelling that ever has, is, or will ever be known to man. You dumb fanboys telling everyone to wait for 4.0 for explanations need to shut the fuck up. At this point, the entire movie will have to be a dedicated explanation of the previous one. Besides, even if it did go back and explain a lot of shit, a lot of the things that 3.0 left out were things that were just essential for the natural flow of events. This movie, on its own merits, is a horribly written and nonsensical butt mess. At this point, if its entire runtime was spent on writing explanations backwards into the story like an amateur, or just fucking redid it. Basically, 4.0 is guaranteed to fail because of this abomination that preceded it. Who is this movie for? Is it for the old fans of Neon Genesis? Nope, because they change almost everything from the original and don't even bother to explain it so that it makes sense in the context of this remake. Is it for new people jumping right into the rebuilds? Nope, because the movie makes no fucking sense! And it still has the gall to reference NGE in spite of shitting on a lot of its canon. References that won't make any sense at all if you haven't seen it. Okay, so let's review the main points in this review. 1. What the fuck? No, seriously, what the fuck? Okay, fine. A little more specifically, nothing makes sense. Evangelion 3.0 blatantly contradicts previous events and established canon from the previous rebuild movies. The movie doesn't even feel connected to the previous installments. There are billions of questions that spiderweb endlessly into even more questions. Too many plot-critical details aren't given to us for no reason other than the fact that Anno is an asshole. The main conflict of the movie is based on a failure to communicate. Most of the characters have been mutilated to the point of unrecognizability with no explanation offered as to how they got that way. The movie expects us to accept too many things that we aren't even told. The movie suffers from more symptom, more impacts, more Evas, more everything, but ultimately ends up being less due to desensitization and lacking severely in the character and story departments. And finally, Anno fucked up Rei! Here's a breakdown of my scores. Sound, 9.5 out of 10. Visuals, 8 out of 10. Characters, 1.8 out of 10. Story, 0.5 out of 10. And enjoyment, -10! Fuck! This is the most disappointing shit since Darker Than Black, Gemini of the Meteor. Only instead of shitting on Hei and Yin, it's shat on Rei. These are 3 of my favorite characters ever, by the way. This movie doesn't fucking deserve such an amazing OST. At best, you could think of it like a CD with a bunch of annoying talking and yelling over it with explosions. I can't in good conscience recommend this movie to anyone. If I were showing Revo to my friends, I'd show them 1.0 and 2.0, and then pretend that that was the end of it. Or at least, ask them to pretend that was the case. Pretend that the world just ended with 2.0. It would suck, but it'd still be better than watching the catastrophic clusterfuck that is Evangelion 3.0. It's really sad looking back at the first 2 movies and how great they are. I have such fond memories of watching them and enjoying the shit out of them. I was really looking forward to what would become of Rei and the other characters. I was excited that they were actually progressing and not regressing. Now I'll have to be reminded of the awful dive the story took. I basically take it as a big fuck you from Anno. Watching 3.0 was like being trapped in a nightmare you can't awake from. It's so awful you wish it wasn't real. You wish you could wake up from the bad dream and find solace in the fact that it never happened. But it is real. It's not just a nightmare. And it will never go away. We need a remake of Rebuild 3.0. It needs a rebuild right after it was made. Did George Lucas do creative consulting for this movie? I think that the title is blatant trolling by Anno. Yeah, you really can't redo this movie.